I always saw her before I heard her. The light in the corner of the cafe caught on her hair in a way that made her look like she belonged there, like the place would be less itself without her. Most mornings I came in at the same time, ordered the same thing, sat by the window like I was waiting for someone who never showed. She always sat across the room, a book in her hands, a coffee she rarely finished. I never said much to her, not at first. Just a nod, once in a while. She nodded back, polite, almost absent. It wasn't until the third week that she spoke, if you could even call it that. "You always order the same thing," she said, not looking up from her book. I didn't know what to do with that, so I laughed a little, awkward. "Creature of habit, I guess." She glanced up then, and her eyes held me longer than they should have. "Habits keep people steady. Or stuck." That stayed with me. Not the words, exactly, but the way she said it, like she wasn't sure which one she was. After that, it became small exchanges. She remembered my order once, called it out before I even reached the counter. Another time, she asked if I'd read the book she was holding. I hadn't, but I lied and said I had just to stay in the moment. She saw through it, smiled in a way that wasn't unkind, just amused. I noticed things about her that didn't belong to words. How she folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares when she was thinking. How her eyes flicked to the door whenever it opened, then softened when it wasn't whoever she was expecting. And how, no matter how long she stayed, her coffee always went cold before she finished it. It was easy to sit near her. It felt like I wasn't alone, even when I was. I'd open my phone sometimes, type out a message I'd never send, "What are you reading today?" Or "Want to sit together?" Then I'd delete it before the words could turn into risk. One morning, the cafe was nearly empty. Just her and me, and the barista half asleep behind the counter. I sat down across from her without asking. She raised an eyebrow but didn't move her book away. "You're braver than usual," she said. "Or just tired," I said, shrugging. She smirked. "Same thing." There was a pause, one of those silences that feel louder than sound. I looked at her hands, resting on the pages. No ring. Just skin, a little dry at the knuckles. She noticed me looking and closed the book. "You should date someone your age," she said suddenly. It wasn't a warning, not exactly. More like she was reminding herself as much as me. "I probably should," I said, voice quieter than I meant. Something shifted then, barely. A crack in the air between us. She leaned back, studied me like she was weighing something she didn't want to name. I thought the moment was over when she stood, gathering her things. I almost said goodbye, almost made it easy. But then, just before walking past me, she leaned down. Her lips brushed mine, not rushed, not careless. Just enough to leave a trace I'd carry home. She didn't say a word. She walked out like nothing had happened. When I finally looked down at my phone, the screen was lit with a message I hadn't noticed come through. It was from her. Just 5 words, tomorrow. Same place. Alone. The next day, she was already there when I walked in. Same corner seat, same untouched coffee cooling in front of her. She didn't look up right away, but when she did, there was a flicker in her eyes, like she'd thought about not coming, but showed up anyway. I sat across from her again, no hesitation this time. The air between us felt different, heavier, like yesterday hadn't been a mistake but neither of us had the words for it. "You came," I said. "You sound surprised." She stirred her coffee, though she didn't drink it. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to." She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed her mug toward me. "It's too strong. Try it." I took a sip. It was bitter, nothing like what I usually ordered, but I nodded anyway. "It's fine." "You lie terribly," she said, a faint smile breaking through. We sat there in silence, and I found myself watching the way she tapped her fingers against the rim of the cup, like a rhythm she couldn't quite settle. Finally, she said, "I haven't kissed anyone in a long time." I froze. Not because of the words themselves, but the way she dropped them into the air, casual and raw at the same time. "Why tell me that?" I asked. She looked past me, toward the window streaked with condensation. Because it felt like I owed you a truth, after yesterday. I wanted to ask 100 questions: who had hurt her, how long it had been, if she regretted it, but all I said was, "It didn't feel wrong." Her gaze snapped back to me, sharp and searching. It should. That was the first time I thought about what this could cost her. She was older, sure, but it wasn't just that. I knew she had a son, close to my age. I'd seen him once, dropping by her place in the building across from mine. That made it complicated, maybe unforgivable. Still, sitting across from her, I couldn't imagine walking away. "You ever think about what people would say?" I asked, softer than I meant. "All the time," she admitted. She folded her napkin into a triangle, then unfolded it again. "But people always talk. They don't live your life for you." Her words lingered. I thought about the messages I never sent, the nights I walked past her door wondering if she was awake too. The barista called out an order, and for a moment we both looked away, pretending the spell had broken. When our eyes met again, something gentler hung there. Not desire, not yet. Just recognition. She reached across the table then, not all the way, just enough that her fingers brushed mine. It was barely a touch, but it stilled me more than the kiss had. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, almost to herself. But she didn't move her hand. The days after, it became routine in a way that wasn't routine at all. I'd see her most mornings, sometimes already seated, sometimes walking in just after me, like it wasn't planned. Like coincidence had learned to repeat itself. We didn't talk about the kiss. Not directly. It hovered unspoken in the way her eyes lingered when I sat down, or how she let her hand stay a little too close to mine on the table. One morning, though, something felt off. She was restless, shifting in her chair, her book unopened beside her. I asked if everything was fine. "I shouldn't be here so much," she said, stirring a tea she never sipped. "Here, with me?" Her silence answered. I looked down at my phone, screen black, thumb tapping at nothing. "If it's too much," she cut me off. "It's not that." Then softer, almost like she regretted saying anything. "It's what people might see." Before I could respond, the bell above the cafe door rang. A man walked in, older, familiar. He greeted her like he knew her, not well, but enough. She straightened in her seat, suddenly formal. "This is my neighbor," she said, nodding toward me. The man gave me a polite nod before moving to the counter. She exhaled when he was out of earshot. "See? That's what I mean. People notice." I wanted to say I didn't care. But I stayed quiet, watching the way her fingers pressed hard against her teacup, as if grounding herself. The moment passed, but it left something unsettled. Later that week, I found her outside instead of inside, standing near the edge of the street, rain just starting to fall. She hadn't brought an umbrella. I held mine over her without asking. "You'll get soaked," I said. She gave me a look, the kind that lingered longer than the words deserved. "You always do the easy thing." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I felt it anyway. Easy. Cowardly. Waiting instead of choosing. We walked in silence, the umbrella barely covering both of us. Our shoulders brushed, again and again, too close not to mean something. My chest felt tight with everything I wanted to say but couldn't. When we reached her building, she stopped under the awning. Neither of us moved to leave. She looked up at me, water clinging to her lashes. For a second, the whole world narrowed to that pause. Her hand lifted, almost touching my arm, then dropped back. "This can't be," she whispered, but her body leaned in all the same. I leaned too, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath, close enough for the question to hang between us. But then a door opened nearby, someone stepping out with their dog. The sound broke everything. She pulled back fast, tucking a strand of wet hair behind her ear like nothing had happened. "Good night," she said quickly, already turning toward the stairs. I stood there in the rain, the word almost burning like a secret between my teeth. It happened on a Sunday evening, the kind of day that feels like it's already slipping out of your hands. I ran into her outside. She was carrying groceries, one bag heavier than it should have been. I offered to help. She didn't argue, just let me take the weight. We walked side by side, nothing remarkable in the air except the faint sound of cicadas and the hum of streetlights warming to dusk. But there was something different in the way she kept glancing at me, like words were pressing against her teeth. You don't go out much, do you? She asked finally. I shook my head. Not really. Why not? You're young. You should be with friends. With? She trailed off. Her grip tightened on the bag she still held. With someone my age, I said quietly. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. Exactly. We reached a bench by the corner, and she set her bag down, sitting like she needed the pause more than the rest. I sat too, leaving space that didn't feel like space at all. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I listened to the sound of her breathing, measured and controlled, like she was holding something back. I used to come here with my husband, she said suddenly. Her tone was flat, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. He hated these little walks. Always asked why we couldn't just drive. But I liked this. She caught herself, pressed her lips together, then exhaled. I don't know why I told you that. Because you wanted to, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to me, sharp and soft at the same time. And what do you want? The question caught me off guard. I looked down at my shoes, at the way the dust clung to them. I thought about all the unsent messages, all the nights I stared at her light across the hall, wondering if she was awake. I want, the words faltered. I don't know if I should say. Then don't. Her voice was firm, but her body leaned closer, her shoulder brushing mine. She didn't move away. It was unbearable, that closeness. The scent of her hair, the warmth of her arm. The ache of wanting something I shouldn't. I saw you the other day, she said softly, almost like a confession. Talking to that girl in the cafe. The one with the green scarf. I blinked. She just asked about a book. I know. Her laugh was brittle, quick. Still. I noticed. The silence after was heavier than anything we'd ever shared. She turned then fully, her eyes locking onto mine. And for once, she didn't look guarded. She looked exposed. Tell me, she whispered. If I asked you to stop coming back, would you? The question hung there, raw and impossible, and I couldn't answer. Not yet. The next morning, I went to the cafe at the usual time. Her corner seat was empty. No book on the table. No half-finished coffee cooling by her elbow. I told myself she was late. That maybe she'd walk in, push the door open with that distracted look she always wore, like she wasn't sure she belonged anywhere but still managed to anchor the whole room. But she never came. The following day, I tried again. Same empty chair. Same silence. On the third day, I stopped ordering my usual. I didn't want it without her guessing it first, without the little ritual that had somehow become ours. I sat near the window, waiting anyway. Every time the bell above the door rang, my chest pulled tight. Every time it wasn't her, it loosened into something heavier. Finally, on the fourth day, I saw her, but not in the cafe. She was across the street, coming out of a small grocery. She had a boy with her. Not a child, not really, my age, maybe younger. He carried the bags for her, and when he said something that made her laugh, it was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her before. I froze. Not jealousy, not exactly. Something harder to name. A truth filling in the blank space she'd kept from me. Later that night, in the hallway outside our apartments, I almost knocked on her door. I stood there, hand raised, listening. I could hear voices inside, hers, his. Too muffled to catch the words, but enough to know I wasn't supposed to be part of that world. I walked back to my place and sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. I typed out a message. I didn't think you'd disappear. Then I deleted it. Typed another. Was it because of me? Deleted that too. What I settled on was simple. I miss you. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I locked the phone without sending. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe. I couldn't. The idea of that empty chair felt heavier than sitting alone at home. But that night, walking past the cafe on my way back from nowhere, I glanced through the window. The chair was still empty. She wasn't there. And somehow, that felt worse than if she'd been with someone else. I leaned against the glass for a moment, watching strangers laugh at tables that had never mattered to me before. And in the quiet, the thought came, sharp and unfinished. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that it was late when I finally saw her again. The hallway light flickered above us, painting everything in a soft, tired glow. She was fumbling with her keys, groceries tucked against her side, when I spoke her name. She froze. Then turned slowly, eyes unreadable, lips pressed into a line. "I thought you stopped coming," she said. "I did." My voice came out rougher than I meant. "You weren't there." Her shoulders dropped, like she'd been holding a weight too long. She set the groceries down by her door. "I wasn't avoiding you," she said, but it sounded like an excuse even to her. "Then what?" She leaned back against the door, hands crossed over her chest. "My son came to visit. He doesn't know how to see me outside of being his mother." And I didn't want to explain why I spend mornings with someone half his age. There it was, the truth, small but enough to redraw the lines between us. I nodded, not sure what else to do. "You could have just told me." "I could have," she admitted. Silence stretched, her eyes fixed on the floor. Then softer. "But I didn't know what you wanted from me. And I didn't trust myself to ask." Something in me cracked then. I'd been carrying all the unsent messages, all the almost words, like they'd rot if I let them out. But now, in the stale hallway air, it felt like the last chance. "I didn't want anything," I said. "Not in the way you think. I stopped, rubbed my hand over my face. I like being near you. That's all." It felt like someone finally noticed I was there. She looked up at me then, and the quiet softened. Her eyes weren't guarded anymore. "Just tired. And honest." "You think I didn't feel the same?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. The hallway buzzed with silence again. I wanted to reach for her, to close the inches between us. But I didn't. I stood still, letting the weight of what she said hang between us. Finally, she pushed off the door, stepped closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that her voice felt warmer. "I can't promise this makes sense," she said. "Or that it goes anywhere. But I don't want to keep pretending I don't look for you." My chest ached at the simplicity of it. No declarations, no promises. Just truth. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Then we don't have to pretend." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Small, tired, but real. And when she reached down, her fingers brushed mine, just enough to feel alive again. "Okay," she whispered. That was it. No kiss, no grand moment. Just the quiet agreement that we'd both stopped running. Time didn't rush after that night in the hallway. It stretched. Slowed. Like life was relearning how to move. We didn't become a couple. Not in the way people like to label things. But she started leaving her door cracked when she knew I was coming home, just enough that I could tap once before stepping inside. Sometimes it was groceries, sometimes it was nothing, just tea steeping too long, her book face down on the counter. I still went to the cafe, though not every morning. And when I did, she joined sometimes. Not in the corner seat anymore, but beside me. She ordered black coffee now and then, even though she didn't like it. I think it was her way of making the memory ours instead of hers. The bench by the corner became part of the routine too. Sunday evenings, same time, both of us pretending it was coincidence until it wasn't. Sometimes she talked about her son, sometimes about the books she half finished. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all, and I learned to be okay with that silence. It was in those silences that I noticed the changes. She didn't fold her napkin into restless shapes anymore. Her hands stayed still, or reached for mine when she forgot to think too hard about it. One night, after a long walk that ended later than either of us planned, we sat under the weak glow of a street lamp. She leaned her head against my shoulder, eyes closed. No words, no tension, just weight shared. "You're here," she murmured, half asleep. "Always," I said, and for once it didn't feel too much. Life didn't get easier. She still worried about people noticing. I still wondered what I could give her that she didn't already have or had already lost. But somewhere between the tea gone cold and the walks that lasted longer than they should, we stopped circling the question of what this was. We just lived it. Months later, I caught her glancing at the clock in the cafe, 8:47 a.m. exactly. She smiled at me, a small private smile. A callback to nothing anyone else would understand. Just us. That's how I knew it had settled. Not into something perfect, but into something real. A life that didn't need finishing touches, just the comfort of showing up. And when I think back, about the empty chair, the missed mornings, the almost goodbyes, I realize it wasn't the kiss or the confession that mattered. It was the pause. The way we chose to step back into it, instead of letting it end there. Now, when I see her fold her hands around a cup of tea she'll forget to drink, I don't think about the rules we broke. I think about the sentence we finally decided to finish. One that only we can read.